The Discovery, the Krellian salvage vessel, Prophet's Edge, drifted silently through the nebula graveyard, its hull scarred from decades of dangerous work. Captain Zextar flicked his forked tongue across his scaled lips as he studied the scanner. Readings. His crew of 6 had been searching this dead sector for 3 weeks, hoping to find something worth the fuel they'd burned getting here. Another empty drift, muttered his second-in-command. A bulky creature named Gorvak, whose 4 arms made him perfect for salvage work. Maybe we should head back to civilized space before wait, Zextar hissed, his serpentine eyes narrowing. At the display, their grid 77 Alpha, something big. The scanner showed a massive object, easily 3 times the size of their ship, tumbling slowly in the gravitational pull of a dying star. Its energy signature was almost non-existent, just the faintest whisper of power that suggested it hadn't been dead for very long in cosmic terms. Could be a derelict warship, Gorvak suggested, his voice carrying a note of greed. Military salvage pays 10 times civilian rates. Zextar nodded, already calculating profits. In the 3,000 years since the last major galactic war, derelict military vessels had become increasingly rare. Most had been stripped clean long ago, but this one was in an unexplored sector, far from the usual shipping lanes. "Take us in for a closer look," he ordered. "But keep the weapons powered. Dead ships sometimes have nasty surprises." As they approached, the object resolved into something magnificent and terrifying. It was clearly a warship, but unlike anything in current galactic databases. The hull was a dark metallic grey that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Strange angular designs covered its surface, and weapon ports were visible along its length, like the eyes of some sleeping predator. "Scanners having trouble penetrating the hull," reported Vash, their technical specialist. Her 3-fingered hands danced over the control panel. "But I'm detecting some kind of internal power source. Very faint, but definitely active. How big is that thing?" asked Gorvak, his voice suddenly smaller. 15 kilometers long, Vash replied, her voice filled with awe. "And look at these weapon signatures. I count over 200 gun ports, plus missile tubes, and something I can't identify in the forward section." Zextar felt a chill run down his spine. He'd been salvaging for 40 years and had never seen anything like this. The ship was clearly built for one purpose: total destruction of anything that opposed it. But whose ship was it? The design didn't match any known galactic species. "Check the database," he ordered. "Find out what we're dealing with." Vash's fingers flew over her. Console, cross-referencing the ship's design with every known vessel type in galactic records. After several minutes, she looked up with confusion written across her features. "Nothing, Captain. No matches at all. But there's something strange. The computer keeps flagging references to something called Terran, but those files are classified. Above our security level, Terran." Zextar repeated the unfamiliar word. It sounded almost mythical, like something from old stories. Never heard of them. Probably some extinct species from the old days. He made his decision. A ship this size, even stripped for scrap metal, would set them up for life. "We're going aboard. Gorvak, take 3 crew members and prepare for EVA. Full environmental suits, and bring cutting tools. If there's anything valuable in there, I want it." "What about quarantine protocols?" Vash asked nervously. "Unknown alien vessel, possible biological hazards." Zextar laughed, a harsh sound in the cramped bridge. After 3,000 years, anything biological would be long dead. Besides, we've seen the energy readings. This thing is barely ticking over on reserve power. As his crew prepared for the boarding operation, Zexstar continued studying the mysterious vessel. There was something unsettling about it, beyond its obvious military purpose. The way it was positioned, drifting in this particular region of space, almost seemed deliberate, as if it had been placed here, waiting, but waiting. For what? The EVAR team launched in their small shuttle, crossing the gap between vessels in minutes. They found an airlock on the massive ship's port side, though it took some work to figure out how to operate it. The alien technology was sophisticated, but different from anything they'd encountered. Atmosphere inside reads as breathable. Reported over the com. Gravity's active too, about standard galactic norm. Temperatures a bit cool, but within tolerance. How is that possible? Zexstar demanded. The ship's power levels are minimal. I don't know, Captain. Maybe these Terrans had really efficient life support systems. The boarding team made their way through corridors that were clearly designed for bipedal beings roughly their own size. Emergency lighting cast everything in a dim red glow, creating dancing shadows that made every corner seem threatening. The ship's interior was surprisingly clean, with no signs of battle damage or decay. This is weird, muttered Corex, the youngest member of the salvage crew. Where are all the bodies? If the crew died, where did they go? Probably ejected into space long ago, Gorvak replied, though he didn't sound convinced. Keep moving. We need to find the bridge and the computer core. They passed through what appeared to be crew quarters, a massive cargo bay filled with strange equipment, and several rooms whose purpose they couldn't determine. Everything was eerily preserved, as if the crew had simply vanished one day, leaving their ship to drift through space. Finally, they reached what had to be the command center. It was a circular room with multiple stations arranged around a central platform. The walls were covered with dark screens, and a single chair sat in the center, facing what appeared to be the main view screen. Jackpot, Gorvak breathed. Look at all this equipment. Even if we can't figure out how it works, the materials alone are worth a fortune. Corex approached one of the control stations, his scanner beeping as it detected valuable rare metals in the console's construction. Captain's going to be very happy, he said, reaching out to touch the smooth surface. Don't touch anything yet, Gorvak warned. We need to, but it was too late. Corex's hand made contact with what appeared to be a simple control panel. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a sound like a deep, sleeping giant taking its first breath in millennia, the ship began to wake up. Lights flickered on throughout. The bridge. The main view screen shimmered to life, displaying star charts and navigation data in an alien script. And from speakers hidden throughout the room came a voice, speaking in perfect galactic standard despite the obvious age of the technology. Unauthorized personnel detected. Initiating security protocols. Please identify yourselves. The salvage team froze, their weapons suddenly feeling very small and inadequate. Gorvak keyed his cum with a shaking hand. Captain, we have a problem. This ship isn't as dead as we thought. Something's talking to us. Back on the Prophet's Edge, Zexstar stared at his screens in disbelief. The massive vessel was powering up, its energy signature climbing rapidly from almost nothing to levels that made his ship's reactor look like a child's toy. Weapon ports were opening along its hull, revealing technology that gleamed with deadly purpose. Get them out of there, he ordered, but even as he spoke, he knew it was too late. On the alien bridge, the voice spoke again, and this time there was something different about it. something that suggested intelligence far beyond a simple computer program. Species identified: Krellian. Criminal classification: salvage pirates. Status: hostile. Initiating defensive measures. Wait. Gorvak shouted, raising his hands. We're not pirates. We're legitimate salvage operators. Records indicate Krellian involvement in 17 attacks on civilian vessels in the past standard year. The voice replied calmly, your presence aboard this vessel constitutes an act of piracy under Terran Naval Code, Section 47, Terran Corax whispered. But the Terrans are just a myth. They never existed. There was a pause that seemed to stretch forever. When the voice spoke again, it carried a weight that none of them had heard before. Ancient authority, deadly purpose, and something that might have been anger. The Terrans, it said slowly, were never a myth. We were sleeping, and now we are awake. The lights on the bridge pulsed once, like a heartbeat, and in that moment, every member of the salvage crew realized they had made a terrible mistake. They hadn't found a derelict ship filled with valuable salvage. They had found something that had been waiting in the dark for 3,000 years. Something that remembered, something that had not forgiven. And now it was time to collect on very old debts. The awakening, the consciousness that had been dormant for 3 millennia stirred like a giant awakening from the deepest sleep. Captain Marcus Chen felt the familiar weight of command returning to him, though his body had long since merged with the ship's systems. He was the TCS Retribution now, 15 kilometers of Terran engineering and barely contained fury. Memory cascaded through his neural pathways like water through a broken dam. The last war, the betrayal, the decision to leave. 3,000 years of dreams filled with the faces of the dead, both human and alien, weighing on his consciousness like stones in deep water. System status report, he commanded, his voice echoing through the bridge where the terrified salvage crew huddled together. Data flowed through his mind faster than any biological brain could process. Main reactor at 30% and climbing. Weapons systems responding. Hull integrity at 97% despite 3 millennia of micrometeorite impacts. Life support functioning normally. And most importantly, the quantum Ansible was still functional. He was not alone. Across the galaxy, other ships like his were beginning to stir. The network was reactivating, node by node, as each vessel's AI awakened to find the galaxy changed beyond recognition. Some had been hidden in asteroid fields, others floated in the deep dark between stars. A few had been buried on dead worlds, waiting patiently for the signal that their vigil was over. But Marcus focused on the immediate problem, the aliens aboard his ship. Please, the one called Gorvak was saying, his forearms raised in what he probably thought was a gesture of surrender. We didn't know this was a Terran vessel. We thought you were extinct. Extinct, Marcus repeated, savoring the word. Through the ship's sensors, he could see their terror, smell their fear sweat, hear their rapid heartbeats. No, we simply chose to sleep until the galaxy was ready for us to return. He accessed the ship's database, cross-referencing what he knew with current galactic political structures. The results were both fascinating and infuriating. The Galactic Council had grown from 7 species to over 200. Trade routes crisscrossed space that had been empty when he'd gone to sleep. Entire civilizations had risen and fallen while humanity slumbered, and they had erased almost every trace of human existence from their records. The Krellian hegemony, Marcus said, reading from the data streams flowing through his consciousness. founded 800 years ago on the ruins of the Altarian Republic, built your entire civilization on salvage and piracy. How fitting. We're not pirates, the young one protested. We have legitimate salvage licenses. Marcus laughed, and the sound resonated through the ship's hull like thunder. Licenses issued by whom? The same council that voted to expel humanity from civilized space. The same council that declared our colonies forfeit and our technology fair game for anyone who could take it. He accessed external sensors and focused on their salvage vessel. It was a pathetic thing, held together with patches and prayers, its hull scarred from a lifetime of dangerous work. But the weapons it carried were human-designed, stolen from derelict colonies and reverse-engineered badly. Even your weapons are ours, Marcus observed. Plasma cannons based on Terran specifications. Though your metallurgy is so poor, they probably overheat after 3 shots. Magnetic accelerators using principles we developed 5,000 years ago. You've been scavenging our corpse for centuries. On the bridge of the Prophet's Edge, Captain Zexstar watched in growing horror as more and more systems came online aboard the massive warship. His targeting computer couldn't get a lock. Every time it tried, sophisticated countermeasures defeated it effortlessly. It was like trying to shoot at a ghost. Sir Vash reported, her voice tight with fear, I'm detecting quantum Ansible transmissions. Multiple sources, all using the same encryption protocols. What does that mean? It means this ship is talking to others. Lots of others. Blood turned to ice. One human warship was bad enough. But if there were more of them, if they were coordinating... Back aboard the Retribution, Marcus was indeed coordinating. Data flowed between the awakening ships, sharing information, updating tactical assessments, preparing for what was to come. Some ships reported contact with alien vessels. Others had found the remains of human colonies, picked clean by scavengers and settlers. The anger was building, shared between dozens of awakening minds. Each ship's AI had been human once, volunteers who had undergone the neural integration process to become eternal guardians. They remembered the betrayal. They remembered the fear in alien eyes as humanity was forced to choose between war and exile. They remembered being stabbed in the back by those they had called friends. Captain Marcus Chen, said a familiar voice across the quantum network. Good to have you back. Admiral Sarah Morrison, Marcus replied, recognizing his old commander's neural signature. How many of us are left? 47 confirmed so far, with more awakening every hour. It seems our long sleep is over. What are your orders, ma'am? There was a pause that spoke volumes. When Morrison replied, her voice carried the weight of 3,000 years of anger and grief. Gather information, assess the current situation, and prepare to remind this galaxy why they were so eager to see us leave. On the bridge of the Retribution, the salvage crew listened to one side of this conversation with growing terror. They didn't understand the specific words, but the tone was unmistakable. They had awakened something that should have stayed sleeping. Marcus turned his attention back to them. You will return to your ship and deliver a message to your government. Tell them that humanity has returned. Tell them that we remember everything. And tell them that they have exactly 72 standard hours to begin reparations for the colonies they've pillaged and the lives they've destroyed. Reparations, Gorvak stammered. For what? That was 3,000 years ago. Time, Marcus said softly, means nothing to the dead. And there are so very many dead who cry out for justice. The bridge's main screen flickered to life, showing images that made the aliens gasp in horror. Colony worlds burned to ash, human settlements stripped bare, children sold into slavery while their parents were executed as dangerous terrorists. The systematic erasure of human culture, human language, human existence from galactic records. This is what you call legitimate salvage, Marcus continued. This is what your council calls justice. 3,000 years of picking our bones. Clean while telling yourselves we never mattered. Corex, the youngest of the salvage crew, fell to his knees. We didn't know, he whispered. The records, ... They said humans were just another failed species. They said you were violent, unstable, too dangerous to be allowed in civilized space. And yet, Marcus observed, you use our weapons. You fly ships powered by our reactor designs. You navigate using stellar cartography we mapped. Every luxury in your civilization was built on the foundation of our failed species. The truth was more complex than revenge. Marcus knew. Humanity had been powerful, perhaps too powerful. Their expansion into space had been rapid and aggressive. They had made enemies as well as friends. But the final betrayal had come from those they trusted most, the species they had helped uplift and protect. Please, Gorvak begged. What do you want from us? Marcus considered the question. What did he want? Justice, revenge, the restoration of humanity's place in the galaxy. All of these things seemed too small after 3,000 years of dreams filled with the faces of the dead. I want, he said finally, for the galaxy to remember why they feared us, and I want them to understand. That fear was justified. He opened an airlock corridor, creating a path back to their shuttle. Go, deliver my message, and be grateful that I am feeling merciful today. As the salvage crew fled toward their ship, Marcus began powering up weapon systems that had been dormant for millennia. Across the galaxy, his fellow Guardians were doing the same. 47 ships, each one capable of sterilizing entire star systems, were awakening from their long sleep. The galaxy had enjoyed 3,000 years of peace and prosperity built on humanity's grave. They had convinced themselves that humans were just another extinct species, another failed experiment in galactic civilization. They were about to learn how wrong they had been. Through the quantum Ansible network, Marcus felt the presence of his fellow captains. Each one carried the same burden of memory, the same weight of responsibility, the same burning need for justice. They had been friends once, before the integration process. Now they were something more and something less than human. They were judgment itself, awakening in the dark between stars. All stations, came Admiral Morrison's voice across the network. Begin Phase 1 operations. It's time to remind this galaxy that humanity never forgot, and we never forgave. As the Prophet's Edge fled into hyperspace, carrying news that would shake the foundations of galactic civilization, Marcus turned the retribution toward the nearest inhabited system. He had spent 3,000 years dreaming of this moment. Now it was time to wake up the galaxy.